I am Rylan Shoemaker from the European CLT Land Trust Network, which is hosting this event today. We're very excited to be hosting this. However, I want to note that this event is co-hosted by Rondo Community Land Trust and the International Center for Community Land Trusts, and is part of a larger series of events that is supported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Thanks to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their generous support, and to Rondo and the International Center for organizing this. I'll talk a little bit about the larger series that this is taking part within. So, as everyone knows, we are launching a feasibility study today that seeks to create a CLT in Lisbon's self-built Cova da Moura neighborhood. And then we'll have a larger discussion on community land trusts and renovation. But before we jump into it, I'll quickly go over our agenda and share a little bit of housekeeping. So first, I will give a bit of context on what community land trusts are, just to make sure that we're all starting off on the same page, though many of us may already be familiar, and why we are gathered today on this topic. And then I will hand over to Ricardo Carneiro and Joanna Lajish to present the feasibility study of a community land trust for Cova da Moura. We will spend about 20 minutes getting a real deep dive into this study with them. Then item 3, we'll take a step back and we'll look at how CLTs are already driving renovation in other places in Europe. So Dali Malnouri from the Community Land Trust Brussels and Valentin Valdou from Rennes Métropole will present their work within the Upcycling Trust project. Finally, we'll have a collective panel discussion, and we may have a small moment for question and answer during this time. Hopefully, let's see how timing goes. Next slide, please, just for a bit of housekeeping. So the chat is open at the moment. Introduce yourself. Thanks to everyone who is introducing yourself. It's nice to know where people are joining us from. If you have questions, the Q&A will be open. The question and answers box will be open throughout the session because we will close the chat here in about 5 minutes. You should see at the bottom of your screen a panel that says Q&A. And yeah, I welcome you to ask any questions that you may have throughout the session there. We will try to respond kind of written back to you if we get the chance. Otherwise, we can follow up after the session. We'll be sending a wrap up to everyone who joins us today, including the recording of the session and notes that are taken. And we will try to answer a couple of questions live as well. As I mentioned at the start, this session does offer live captions and live translation. So if you would like to use that, you can follow the instructions that are on the slide in order to have live captions translating into your language. Great, okay. And just to give a little bit more context on the series that is taking place, of which this event is one part. So the Global Community Land Trust Virtual Summit started at the beginning of May and runs through mid-June. It is a 6-week series of free online events organized by CLTs and community land trust networks from around the world. It was conceived to reclaim and honor the Black and Indigenous leadership traditions that gave rise to the community land trust model, and it continued to shape community land stewardship globally. And we're really happy to be a part of this. Thanks very much to the co-hosts and organizers, Rondo Community Land Trust and the International Center for CLTs. And I invite you to follow along with the other events that are taking place. Next slide, please. We can go ahead and jump into what are CLTs. Perfect. So community land trust. Sorry, I think we may have a slight technical difficulties with our slides, but I will carry on. Next slide, please, if possible. Perfect. So we're going to be talking about a solution here today, but I want to start by grounding us in a shared problem, a shared set of problems that we're all collectively facing, that we argue, kind of from the community land trust perspective, lies with the problem of land. So we see that land is not being used for public benefit, and that creates some symptoms that are causing problems around Europe, including housing unaffordability and lack of security in housing. It contributes to the climate crisis. We see that the built environment is a major consumer of energy, major producer of greenhouse gas emissions in Europe as well, both in producing housing and through the energy consumption of existing homes. And finally, we see that there is a lack of agency for communities and for residents. We see that development is often done to communities. So CLTs then, community land trusts, next slide, please, start from this point. They argue that land should be serving the public good, and community land trusts then operate to make sure that this is put into practice. So CLTs are nonprofit organizations that own, develop, and manage land for the benefit of the people that live there. So what does that mean in practice? CLTs have three major defining characteristics, and it's easy to explain just by using the three words, community, land, and trust. So the first, community, CLTs are truly participative. They have a democratic and inclusive governance structure that ensures that the people who are living in community land trust homes or in the neighborhood where a CLT is operating are represented within the governance of the CLT, as well as other representatives from the neighborhood and that community, and kind of broader representatives of the public interest in the area where CLTs are operating, including sometimes public administrations. The second word, land. CLTs separate the ownership of land from the ownership of buildings that are on them. And what that means is that CLTs foster affordable, secure tenancy, and they counter speculation on land value by removing land from the speculative market. Finally, trust. So CLTs create permanent affordability, and they are built to exist in perpetuity, so forever. And what that means is that they safeguard investment that is put in for affordability for generation after generation, so that people can benefit from public investment or private investment forever. And land will never re-enter the speculative market. Next slide, please. What we see is that CLTs across Europe are growing. So since 2023, we have moved from a loose collection of CLT projects to the European CLT Network being created and representing CLTs across 10 European countries, soon to be 11 as we're welcoming a new CLT member from Torino, Italy, as well as a few others, and Portugal, hopefully. Perfect, my slide is well centered. So what we see, what this slide shows us is that we have, through our members, a representation of over 31,000 homes, 6,000 of which have currently been developed and over 25,000 of which are currently in the pipeline. We see that CLTs are delivering not only community assets, or not delivering not only homes, but they're also delivering community assets, including green spaces and social hubs, in addition to the affordable housing that they are creating. We see that CLTs offer a range of different tenure forms, from home ownership to affordable rental to cooperative housing. And we see that CLTs are also strong partners. So they're initiated by citizens, by social housing providers, local governments, and they work with private developers and citizen groups and civil society in order to deliver impact. And so CLTs are growing in Europe. They're offering a solution for affordable housing, for community agency, for sustainability, and they're working together with other actors in the built environment. Where this brings us to today is that am very excited to be sharing with you the feasibility study for Cova da Moura. So Joanna Lajish and Ricardo Carneiro will be joining us shortly to present their feasibility study. This feasibility study is the outcome of years of research a collaborative research project that has taken place. And why we are so excited about this is that it really shows the potential for a neighborhood level renovation of a CLT in a way that can secure land tenureship for a community that has been in an unstable position for years and faced contestation. And it's really the perfect sort of marrying of the three objectives of CLTs and a perfect response to the three problems that I outlined in the beginning of a lack of affordability, the climate crisis, and a lack of community agency. So to shortly introduce Ricardo and Joanna, before I hand over to them, Ricardo is an architect, an urban planner, and right to housing activist. Maybe we can already spotlight Ricardo and Joanna while I introduce them. He is the co-founder of Estudio Periférico, pardon my Portuguese pronunciation, which is a Lisbon-based collective working across architecture, urbanism, planning, housing, and urban policy. He holds a degree in architecture from the University of Lisbon, and alongside the studio's practice, it also maintains dedicated lines of work in timber construction and in the research and development of community-led, non-speculative housing models. Welcome, Ricardo. And Joanna Lajish from the Center for Socioeconomic and Territorial Studies, who is also an architect and researcher. She holds a degree in architecture and a PhD in urbanism from the University of Lisbon. Her research bridges architecture and the social sciences, advancing participatory and research by design approaches to housing precarity, the right to housing, and spatial justice, with a particular focus on urban diversity and inequality. Thank you, Joanna and Ricardo, for joining us today to present your study. And without further ado, I will hand over to you to screen share and take us through the study.
Thank you so much for having us. The first thing we want to acknowledge is this wonderful opportunity to show the study. We are here also on the behalf and mainly on the behalf of the Neighborhood Commission of Cova da Moura. So we are here to present this. Oh, can you see it? Oh, screen. Okay, so share. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. So we are presenting this strategy for this future community land trust at Cova da Moura. And the first thing that we want to say is that many people before us have made studies and research on this topic. So we also built our knowledge on top of that, and we want to acknowledge that. But this is a 50 years old, 5 decades for waiting for an urban solution. It's the largest self-built area in the Lisbon metropolitan area. And it's also a pilot project because we don't have any community land trusts yet in Portugal. So we think it's important to give a sense of also of the context and of the origin. Where are we? So we are in Portugal in a municipality called Amadora, which borders Lisbon. And actually it became a very kind of central location since you can easily take a train that takes you in 10 minutes to Lisbon city center. And what about the location? So this land was a farm in the 60s, which was abandoned at the end of the 50s. And the first records of people living in Cova da Moura back to the 1960s. And from a very early stage, people were coming from different places. So by the end of the 90s, the boundaries in the construction of the neighborhood as they were stabilized as they are today. And actually, this is today. So it's a picture that shows us this physical and social dimension in division of the middle class neighborhood that surrounds Cova da Moura. We are bringing also some screenshots from a movie from Rui Simões called Island of Cova da Moura. Those images were provided by residents and showed the construction of the neighborhood and the construction of the streets, the houses, the local associations. This is one of them. And give us the feeling of this place and of the density that characterizes this place. Land ownership, which is kind of the big issue that until now prevented the requalification process. Most land is mostly private, as you can see in this whitish part. And then we do have a part which is public owned, which is roughly 15% of the neighborhood. So this has been a major question for what to do with Cova da Moura. So it's a multi-ethnic neighborhood with a large percentage of people coming from Cape Verde, showing that it's a strong community, although it's very stigmatized in the media, and it has so it lives between this kind of a image of stigmatized place, but also a place with very community and cultural ties. It has a level of infrastructure that has been growing over the years, although it needs, maintenance and repair. And we are talking about a place that's, where roughly 5,000 people live. And it's a very culturally, it's a very strong place. This is Fincape, one of the Batuque groups, and this is actually a Portuguese immaterial heritage festivity called Cola San João that happens only. Cola San João at Cova da Moura became immaterial heritage. But we don't want to forget that police violence is frequent. This is a news from 2 years ago. A man was shot in the neighborhood by the police. And this connects also with racialized territories and with structural racism. And we also acknowledge these conflicts and tensions in the neighborhoods. So acknowledging conflicts and tensions, it's obviously connected to the struggle for the right to housing. And this is kind of a super simple chronology that we made to explain how the neighborhood was built and what's the relation with planning and with possible solutions. So Cova da Moura started, as many other neighborhoods, after the Carnation Revolution, after the end of the dictatorship in Portugal. And then this is the first decade of consolidation. But in the early 2000s, 2002, the first proposal for a master plan was based on a massive demolition. And in fact, that was the catalyzer for the opposition of the residents and local associations. And that was the moment where the neighborhood commission, that it's composed by 4 different local associations, was created. So in 2005, as a counteract, a new planning process was launched, and they had this motto: the renovation of the neighborhood, it's possible if we want it to be, which I think is wonderful. But, and actually it was an initiative called Bairros Críticos, critical neighborhoods. But after a few years, it stopped. So public policy, this program actually stopped. And since then, no formal solution was delivered to Cova da Moura. And in fact, this local housing strategy that is for the municipality says that Cova da Moura is just too big and too complex. So let's, expect 2035 in order to solve it. But in the meantime, we were in 2013, we had this wonderful session at Cova da Moura. I believe it was the first time that community land trust was addressed and it was discussed in Portugal. I was actually in Cova da Moura by our beloved Yves Caban. And this planted this seed for that change. And we started 10 years after a feasibility study for implementing this idea. But while we were making the study in 2023, again, the question about demolition and again, the question about eviction. And in last year's election, municipal elections, so local elections, one of the candidates of a major party had as a campaign goal to eradicate Cova da Moura. saying that there was a program in place. And so we are talking about, again, about eradication as, as a plague. And eradicate, we just think that this is a fail. Demolishing Cova da Moura would be a triple mistake, in our opinion, will be very expensive, environmental unsustainable, and socially destructive. And so this is the point where we are now.
Also facing these statements, what a better way to reply that a community-led regeneration process with the goal of affordability, permanence, and community agency. So, what if a community land trust for Cova da Moura could be the answer to overcome this 50-year-old quagmire sorry, está fora do question, não estou. Encompassing land and property, planning instruments, rehabilitation of housing and tenure, and of course, community permanence. This idea brought together a network of friends and partners, of course, the Neighborhood Commission, REARC Institute, who funded the study, of course, Yves Caban, our mentor and CLT champion, our team of consultants, and of course our network of international friends and partners. Of course, European CLT Network, our hosts, with whom we've been working from the beginning. So this is the local. Highlight very quickly Emilio, Wanda, Domingos, and Jaquilson from the Neighborhood Commission. Of course, Arcila, when she visited, one of our consultants and major friend and supporter of the study. Of course, also Helena Roseta, who, among other things, is the name behind our basic housing law. And of course, the late Liv Meerschat, historical community leader and organizer for Cova da Moura. Also, three major references, of course. Fideicomiso de la Tierra, Cañón Parte Peña, the first CLT established within informal settlements. Again, termo territorial coletivo, highlighting here Tarsila, of course. Bridging also this the experience from the favelas of Rio de Janeiro. And of course, our own Portuguese communal land practices, century-old, a specific type of rural land, communal land tenure. So, what if we could bridge this tradition with CLTs and CLTs and prepare our feasibility study, not as a technical or a research document, but as an action tool, an instrument for change, and in fact, a roadmap for land regularization, urban rehabilitation, and community permanence. So that, in fact, it was what we did, a 29-step roadmap focusing three main dimensions: urban rehabilitation, land regularization, and community permanence, upon four main vectors of the feasibility study. So the legal study addressing CLT model adaptation, the urban study addressing planning and rehabilitation strategy, the financial study addressing the sustainability, economical and financial model, and also, of course, underlying each one of them, the participation and community engagement, building upon the already proven ability to organize. So the study was organizing, intertwining these three vectors. So the four consultancies: legal, urban, financial, and real estate. A social housing survey with 610 respondents, and community mobilization upon three fundamental principles: land tenure, rehabilitation of the neighborhood, and community permanence. So, who lives in Cova da Moura and how, which gave us a very representative update of the community. So, 63%, no surprise, of Cape Verdean origin, but also 68% of the residents told us that they enjoyed the home, their current home, and 24% were really happy with their housing conditions. In total, 98% of the residents considered the legalization of the neighborhood to be important. 91% of the total considered it very important, and these results inform the works and carried out within the four consultancies. So within the legal study and the adaptation of the CLT model, one of the key questions was if the CLT classical model was feasible in Portugal, and if so, if it could be adapted for self-built and informal settlements like Cova da Moura. So lots of issues arose. So would classical model CLTs could be transposed to Portugal? Could be adapted? Could they be adapted to Cova da Moura? What would the collective organization type be? And would it allow that the historical legitimacy and representational role of the Comissão do Bairro, the Neighborhood Commission, to be formally recognized? So the work undertaken by Tarsila confirmed all the three issues. So the classical model could be transposed to Portugal with minor adaptations, and also to Cova da Moura under a non-profit and association with specific land tenure bylaws clauses. It was also confirmed by Tarsila that the current legitimacy given to the Neighborhood Commission could be transposed to a future CLT under a new democratic governance. But it also included learning from these changes or exchanging experiences. This picture was taken during a visit when Tarsila visited us, and Reginaldo, which is first in the photo, was telling that one of the issues probably in the future would be the difficulty of a full rehabilitation, urban rehabilitation process, given that in Cova da Moura some places have very narrow streets and alleys with a couple of hundred families living it. So one of the issues that Tarsila brought was that in Rio de Janeiro, almost 2 million people live in alleys and in small and narrow streets. So that would not be the issue. The issue would be the will to undertake the urban rehabilitation and regeneration process. So another question was, can urban regeneration be driven by community-led planning? Of course, one of the key issues to resolve was land. The neighborhood stands on private land mainly, and this is what was considered always the fundamental legal obstacle for Cova da Moura to remain. So our proposal is simple. Since we have already a state state plot in the neighborhood, our proposal is for the state to acquire the private plot and leases both to the CLT, ensuring non-speculative and affordability clauses under the mechanisms already provided by our own basic housing law. So, of course, planning-wise, we're talking about a tailor-made urban solution, of course, targeting planning amendments to municipal planning framework and master plan, a community-led development plan constructed with the residents and integrating community knowledge, and operational planning units intertwined with the CLT, making possible that the CLT brings to to force a really democratic urban transformation and planning instrument. And of course, all of these three allowing an incremental urban upgrading, allowing permanence to operate as a democratic planning strategy. So all of these issues also came together as positive. So planning amendments are possible within the master plan with the new Cova da Moura's planning sub-planning unit. Also, with a new development plan allowed by the former, developed by the community in coordination with the municipality, of course. And most of all, this intertwining planning and CLT seat structure under the new implementation units linked with the CLT to be developed within the development plan. So all these planning issues and changes and proposals allow to build on to a site-specific rehabilitation solution with incremental property regularization, reconciling conflicting territorial, social, and ownership interests, non-speculative land and housing framework, protecting neighborhood from market-driven displacement, of course, enforcing affordability in perpetuity, stabilizing housing costs and preserving long-term community permanence, and of course, long-term tenure security for residents, collective mechanisms for strengthened residential stability. Surveys and urban analysis further confirmed that we could spatially articulate plot structure, density, occupancy, regulatory adaptation, urban safety conditions, spatial adaptation, and urban connectivity through these land regularization, urban rehabilitation, and community permanence planning scenarios, allowing us to collectively, between the team and with the neighborhood commission, to identify the most favorable one, informing those 29 steps roadmap.
So 5 minutes left. So which economic and financial model can sustain collective land stewardship and the long-term rehabilitation for Cova da Moura? So we had this model made by Ricardo Veludo and was working with, setting up what strategic partners can we mobilize, also the key resources, and this was all very graphical and very nailed to the point, which led to 2 or 3 conclusions that we want to share here. First, this is a phased and distributed investment strategy over 15 years. So there is a long run, and there is also distribution of money. Talking about money, this seems a huge amount of money, and it is. It's somewhere around 150 millions for the entire process running for 15 years. And what about the cost structure? So a part, it's obviously for the acquisition of land. Then we have topographic survey and also a cadastral regularization, but also technical studies that the neighborhood needs, like fire safety and seismic risk, also connected with the urban planning studies, design projects, and the construction management and the site supervision in order to operate those plans. Construction works in public space in darker red, and then obviously the establishment and operation of the CLT itself for 15 years. But the majority is in red. It's the construction works in buildings. So 78% of this investment needs to be made in the buildings itself. So showing that a huge part of this investment will be taken by the owners of the houses themselves, because it's their own houses. So with the state and the municipality of Amadora allowing for 8% each. Obviously, this needs to be done through preferential credit lines provided, hopefully, we hope, by the European Investment Bank or similar, or the Council of Europe Development Bank. So closing with a community mobilization that was made throughout the process. So how to explain this idea, separating land from the buildings, etc. First, the coordination and work meetings with the neighborhood commission, but then we developed some workshops, developing also specific tools like a wall newspaper to make some information. We also screened the Arc of Justice, a wonderful short film on the New Communities Inc., one of the first CLTs. And then a wonderful idea was to bring the theater of the oppressed that worked on this idea to explain CLT in this form of theater that it's very engaging. Resident assemblies, we need to make more. This is a photo of last week's on Saturday. We need more, and we need more communication and more participation. Renovation without demolition flyers explaining, but we reached the conclusions, and this was a beautiful photo taken by someone who was choosing one of our participatory tools, and he was saying people are tired of so many attempts that have not worked. So there is this capital of hope that we need to make bigger. And the future of Cova da Moura will be not decided by demolition. We cannot accept that, but by the collective courage to recognize it, rehabilitate it, and to build upon the community that already exists. So thank you so much. And o futuro está no bairro. So the future is in the neighborhoods. Thank you. And
Joanna and Ricardo, thank you so much for presenting the study. And many more claps coming through. Yeah, thank you for presenting this. And I loved how you closed of a future decided by collective courage and a future by the neighborhood. Is this the feasibility study printed?
Which is
amazing.
Big and will be available once we present it publicly. Will be available in the net, so in the web, so in order to others to share it and learn from it. Awesome.
Perfect. And we will be, for everyone who's on the call, we will be circulating slides and information afterwards. So you will have access to some of this information. And then, as Joanna has just said, once the feasibility study is shared, it will be published online. So you can learn even more and revisit it in the future. It's hard to follow. That was incredible. And thank you again for presenting this. When we were planning this event, Joanna, Ricardo, and I were speaking, and we talked about how we wanted to frame a broader conversation around the work that is taking place in Cova da Moura. Especially the questions around demolition and community displacement that were shared are extremely relevant across Europe. Ricardo shared the question, what if a community land trust could be the solution for community-led renovation with permanent affordability and community agency? I'm paraphrasing Ricardo, but many others are also asking this question. And there are other examples already of CLT principles used as a tool in renovation. And we thought that this would be a really interesting connection to make to show that this does work in practice across a diverse range of contexts in which CLT principles can be applied to achieve renovation while avoiding displacement and safeguarding affordability. So within the CLT, the European Community Land Trust sector, there is a project currently taking place called the Upcycling Trust. And it's a perfect fit. It focuses exactly on this question. So for the following section, I am pleased to invite two representatives from the project to join us today. So shortly, I will hand over to Dali Malnouri, who is the Advocacy and Project Officer at Community Land Trust Brussels. Dali is trained as a political scientist and passionate about participatory democracy and the governance of commons. In his ongoing projects, including Upcycling Trust, he aims to develop replicable solutions to use energy renovation as a leverage for creating affordable housing while strengthening local communities. And before I hand over to Daddy will then hand over after he introduces the Upcycling Trust project to Valentin Valdu, who is the Upcycling Trust project manager at Rennes Métropole, where he will present the work currently taking place in Rennes. Valentin works on building reuse, urban regeneration, and strategies for energy renovation and affordable housing. His work focuses on transforming existing building stock and on developing permanently affordable housing models through the French Bail Réel Solidaire, which is inspired by community land trust principles. And both of them will share more about their work very shortly. So I hand over to Dali now.
Thank you, Rylan, and hello everyone. And I hope you hear me well. Please let me know if you don't hear me. So I'll present the ongoing Upcycling Trust project. That is a project which is led by a consortium of community land trusts and organismes de foncier solidaire, which are the French equivalents of CLTs in France, and a number of local authorities. It's meant to specifically address the emergence of two colliding crises, the housing crisis on one hand, but of course the pressing needs to address the climate crisis, with the need to shift away from new builds to avoid land take, but also specifically in Europe, we have an increasing number of regulations and climate targets to reduce the carbon emissions in the building stock, and to improve the energy efficiency of buildings. And we have seen in many places in Europe that often the policies that are supposed to carry out this energy transition of homes is not adequately supporting the most vulnerable and low income groups. And so as a result, we have seen that there are emerging phenomena of renovictions in many cities across Europe, and the risk of green gentrification, whereby the local low-income communities would be displaced as a result of not being able to meet these energy renovation and climate targets, and would be pushed out from the cities. So we started this project 2 years ago to come up with a mechanism that would use the community land trust mechanism to provide an integrated approach to energy renovation, basically providing the kind of support that is needed by the most low income groups, and at the same time transferring those private homes or vacant homes, basically any home in the existing building stock into a CLT, so that those renovated homes would remain affordable forever. And so we have started implementing this mechanism in various local contexts in these 4 cities in France and Belgium, with different architectural typologies, different tenure models, in order to really test the replicability of this model later on across Europe. And we have also selected partners that would bring in very different approaches from the CLT side, but also from the OFS in France that Valentin will present you, and public authorities who are interested in the model, and bringing in, of course, local associations and academia. And I'll have a handover now to Valentin.
Hello, I think you can pause the slide. Hello everyone, thank you very much for the invitation. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, okay. So I am Valentin Vaudou and I work for Rennes Métropole in Western France. Today I would like to present how Rennes Métropole is trying to connect three important objectives. You can pass if you want, Ben, please, the slide. The urban regeneration, energy renovation, and long-term housing affordability. Of course, the context in Rennes is very different from the situation in Cova da Moura, but I think we are facing some similar questions across Europe. How to renovate existing neighborhoods while maintaining affordability and protecting existing residents over the long term. And in both cases, CLT approaches can help create new solutions. Today, I will especially focus on these reflections are linked with the European project Upcycling Trust and how we are exploring new approaches through the Bail Réel Solidaire, which is a French model which is inspired by the CLT model. So you can pass the slide. First, a few words about the context of Rennes Métropole. Rennes Métropole is composed of 43 municipalities with around 500,000 inhabitants today, including around 240,000 people in Rennes itself. And our metropolitan area is growing very quickly with around 5,000 new inhabitants every year, and this demographic growth creates strong pressure on the housing market. In 2025, we had around 30,000 applicants for social housing. And at the same time, we want to limit urban sprawl and reduce land consumption. So the main challenge is how to produce affordable housing without expanding the city too much. This question is becoming central in our metropolitan housing strategy. You can pass the slide. One important answer is building reuse and rehabilitation. In our metropolitan housing strategy for 2023 to 2028, Rennes Métropole plans to deliver 30,000 new homes. But the objective is not only to build new housing. We also want to reduce land consumption and preserve existing urban areas. That's why one strategic objective is to increase the reuse and rehabilitation of existing buildings. And today we aim for around 10% of future housing production through rehabilitation and building reuse, which represents around 500 housing units per year. The strategy is directly connected to the objectives of Upcycling Trust. And in parallel, on the next slide, the Rennes Métropole is also developing the BRS model, which is inspired by the CLT model. The model separates land ownership from housing ownership in order to reduce housing prices and maintain long-term affordability. And in Rennes, this model exists already. This model already exists since 2018. Today, more than 900 housing units have already been delivered through this mechanism. And today, the strategy is evolving. We are now exploring how this model could also be applied to existing housing stock, especially in all the buildings and condominium contexts. On the next slide, we show one example in the historic center of Rennes, because since 2011, Rennes Métropole has conducted an important rehabilitation program for degraded condominiums in the city center. The initial objective was mainly urban rehabilitation and heritage preservation, but progressively another objective became more important: maintaining affordable housing in the city center for modest income households. And more recently, Rennes Métropole started to experiment with introducing BRS mechanisms into renovated historic buildings. This experience helped us understand that rehabilitation policies can also become long-term affordability strategies. And this reflection is now continuing through a new pilot project. So on the next slide, this brings me to the pilot project developed by Rennes within the Upcycling Trust project. So the pilot project focuses on the Villejean district in Rennes. Villejean is a post-war condominium neighborhood located near the university campus. And today the district faces several challenges. We observe growing pressure from students co-living in families' apartments, and at the same time, families are progressively leaving the neighborhood. So the ambition of the pilot project is to reintroduce socially diverse families into the district and preserve affordable family housing within the private housing market. So the objectives are to reduce speculation, support social mix, and encourage renovation. On the next slide, we present the intervention pathway that we are currently exploring. Indeed, the idea is that the OFS, so Office Foncier Solidaire, could intervene in existing condominiums to support both affordability and renovation dynamics. One important objective is to facilitate energy renovation while avoiding displacement of residents. We are also reflecting on another mechanism that was presented to us during the upcycling trust exchanges, especially through discussions with CLT Brussels. Even at Rennes Métropole, we sometimes call it informally the Brussels model. The idea would be the following. An owner occupier could sell their dwelling to the OFS and then buy it back immediately under a BRS contract. Because the land is separated, the price becomes lower, and the financial difference could then help finance condominiums renovation works. And importantly, the household could remain in the same dwelling during the process. For the moment, this mechanism is still under reflection. Nothing has been launched yet, but the project during in the context of upcycling trust, and we are currently exploring its technical feasibility. We find this approach very interesting because it creates a possible link between energy renovation, anti-speculation mechanisms, and protection of existing residents. And the next and last slide for me, the conclusion. So to conclude, Rennes Métropole is progressively exploring how to combine building reuse, energy renovation, long-term affordability, and CLT approaches within existing neighborhoods and condominiums. The objective is not only to renovate buildings, but also to prevent displacement, reduce speculation, and maintain social diversity over time. Of course, many challenges remain, especially financial complexity and the need for strong public involvement. And that's why projects like Upcycling Trust are very valuable because they allow cities to share ideas, experiences, and new approaches together between different cities. That's fine for me. Thank you for listening.
Daddy, over to you now.
Yes, happy to conclude with providing a bit of an overview of the advocacy goals of the project. I hope you still hear me well. So one of the main goals of this project was also to develop policy recommendations based on the experiences that we learned from the ongoing pilots in these 4 cities, to promote this CLT based mechanism policymakers, both at local level but also at European level, since many of the climate policies are set at European level. And there is still a clear case, of course, for the model, since we see that the energy crisis just keep repeating themselves, and in many places we still don't see solutions to meet these needs of the local low income and vulnerable groups. The with the European network of CLTs, the CLT Brussels is really advocating at local level, also at European level, to link basically the housing and climate policies, because we see that these are still dealt with in completely separate manners, and they just keep reinforcing themselves. That's the first step. But also we are really targeting some local climate policies, such as the social climate plans or the national building renovation plans that are set to be adopted this year by all EU countries. And we have already seen that in the national building renovation plan for the Wallonia region of Belgium, they have included the model. So that's already a great first step that we'd like to promote now in other countries as well. We are also targeting some specific angles of renovation, such as building vacancy, which is also one of the top priorities of housing policies across Europe, and also collective renovations. And this is basically the main focus of another project that the CLT Brussels is working on, called AREC. At European level, we also see that housing policy has become one of the main priorities and is dealt with in one of the departments of the European institutions that is jointly dealing with housing and energy. So we see a good opportunity there to promote for a CLT-based approach. And so if you want to follow up a bit what we are going to publish in the coming months and years with the project, I invite you to have a look at the manifesto that was published last year, that basically sets out all the policy recommendations to adopt CLTs for renovations. And we will publish later this year case studies that really explain in details how it's being done in the 4 cities. And I'm happy to, of course, answer to all your questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Daddy, and thank you, Valentin, for presenting from the Upcycling Trust. And we are doing well on time. I think we can stop sharing our screen and spotlight all of the speakers for a short panel discussion. So we have about 15 to 20 minutes for this. We have heard a number of very interesting presentations today, and all of you are working on addressing renovation objectives while avoiding community displacement and safeguarding permanent affordability. And you're doing so in quite different geographies and from unique perspectives. So what I'm hoping we can do in this short discussion is start to draw some connections between these presentations. And just a note to participants, we should have time for 1 to 2 small questions from the audience if you want to send them in the Q&A. I think a couple have already been answered by Joanna and Ricardo, principally. We won't have time to get into too many details, unfortunately, but we will be following up with a communication afterwards and publication on our website. So even if we don't get to your question here, we will get to it in some form. Without further ado, I will ask Ricardo and Joanna a question to start us off. So we heard from Valentin about Rennes Métropole and the work that they're doing. And Rennes is providing an example of a public authority that has integrated into their long-term public strategy decarbonization and permanent affordability. And you've done so using its urban planning policy. So it's an interesting example of public support to this policy. What could Lisbon or other Portuguese public authorities learn from this approach?
Well, I think we do have a lot to learn from the triangulation between, using a model as CLT, which is based on a community will, but also relying on strong support from public authorities and public institutions. And in this case, I think that we also think that municipalities are very close, are in an excellent level of proximity of places in order to understand the communities, to understand the problems, and to act. So therefore, we are very keen on, having this model promoted and discussed with at the municipal level in different shapes, and we look at Europe and we see that different places are using this model and adapting this model. And we can see differences in the way it has been implemented by municipalities in Belgium and by municipalities in France, obviously. And I think that local adaptation is needed, obviously, always. But it shows us that there is an involvement, the involvement of public authorities. For us, it's very positive because it also strengthens this idea of urban planning as a common good and CLTs not just as a enclosed community that can have. Oh, sorry, I have a cat here. And an idea of common good and planning for a common good. And especially because I think what is interesting in all of our presentations, and well, at least the presentations of our colleagues, is to see that this is a response not just to a housing issue, but it's a response to climate change, is a response to social integration in our case. So if it has this relation with public authorities, public entities, public institutions, it can also address other dimensions that rather than just providing housing, or which is fairly needed, but it can also grow to address other type of questions, and therefore we need them for in with us.
Thank you very much, Joanna. And I think it's a perfect segue to a question for Valentin. Your point on this is a tool that can address many different dimensions, not only provision of housing. So Valentin, the work that you shared with us today demonstrates that Rennes Métropole has chosen to prioritize both permanent affordability and energy renovation by using the BRS scheme, which is a tool based on CLT principles. And it also shows how much can be accomplished with this integrated public support that Rennes has provided. Can you tell us a little bit about why Rennes has chosen to focus on the BRS scheme for renovation and how the Metropole benefits in achieving other long-term objectives like Joanna was mentioning?
Thank you for the question. I think Rennes Métropole became interested in the BRS model for renovation because we progressively understood that energy renovation alone is not enough. If renovation increases housing prices too much, there is a risk that existing households can no longer afford to stay in the neighborhood. So for us, the question became, how can we combine climate objectives with long-term affordability and social stability? The BRS model is interesting because it helps us reduce speculative pressure and maintain affordable housing over time, even after renovation. It's also a way to preserve social diversity in existing neighborhoods, especially in areas where housing pressure is increasing. And for Rennes Métropole, this is not only a housing tool, it's also connected to broader metropolitan objectives, limiting urban sprawl, supporting energy transition, preventing displacement, and stabilizing vulnerable condominium context. And another important point is that the BRS model allows strong public intervention while keeping housing in the private market. So in my opinion, the key message for public authorities is that these models are not only social policies, they are also long-term urban investment strategies. And finally, as I said before, I think projects like Upcycling Trust are very useful because they help public authorities discover new approaches through European cooperation and exchanges of experiences.
Thank you very much, Valentin, for sharing a bit more context of why Climate Métropole has chosen to take this approach to renovation. And you mentioned being in this exchange with Upcycling Trust. You mentioned previously in our planning call that there is an approach referenced as the Brussels model, and you shared a little bit about that in your call today. We have Dali from CLT Brussels with us on the call. Dali, you've mostly focused on the high-level overview of the Upcycling Trust project and the policy support that's needed. But CLT Brussels is doing its own renovation pilots. Could you tell us a little bit about CLTB's renovation work? And especially, I'd be interested to hear about the perspectives of the residents that CLTB is working with, if possible.
In Brussels, we're currently renovating two homes with two private homeowner occupiers that are in a situation of energy poverty, and they're very low income households. And we basically, we have started really addressing needs that are really growing in Brussels. We have also clear statistics showing how many people in Brussels won't afford to meet the energy renovation requirements, and so the consequence of that is clearly that they will be forced to probably sell or to move out from the neighborhoods that they've been living in forever. So for them, even if they were not necessarily convinced about the model for ideological reasons, let's say, or because of the higher social purpose of the model that we're proposing, but for them it was really offering housing security and on the long term, basically by allowing them to renovate their homes, so it would also increase their quality of life, sometimes addressing all the health issues that were coming from their very derelict homes. And so really and of course for them staying within their communities in neighborhoods that are currently under high gentrification pressures in Brussels, notably due to these energy renovation requirements set by the local authorities. We see lots of promoters already coming and buying up homes to because they're the only ones able to renovate them, and really pushing out certain residents. So for them, it was also a way basically to be able to stay in a comfortable renovated home, increasing their quality of life, and at the same time, of course, they were happy to be able to contribute to the neighborhood, which they were part of, by making that home affordable on the long term as well.
Thank you very much, Dali. Thanks for sharing about the work that CLTB is doing. I wanted to then turn to the Q&A, but it seems that all questions have been answered by Joanna and Ricardo already. Thanks for being so on it in the Q&A, you two. If there are other questions that participants have, we have a couple of minutes still to answer them, so feel free to send them in the Q&A. Maybe, Joanna and Ricardo, do you want to answer out loud this question about local context and what urban, architectural, and geographic dimensions the other communities should take into account when strategizing their CLTs? Because I liked your answer very much. And maybe you can just highlight it for everyone.
Well, Well, thank you so much for the interest. I think it's maybe for the questions that were in the were asked, we can say that obviously that when architecture and urban planning addresses a place that it's already built with all its fragilities and with all this local context that we wanted to express because we are not developing a CLT from scratch. I think that instead of urging to make sometimes architects are very interested in making something which is very flashy, very new. Demolition, it's in many cases the first option. And what we see in places like Cova da Moura in our survey response to that is that people actually would like to see their houses improved, would like a lot to see the plot and the houses legal in terms of, it really connects with people's lives, so sharing, selling, inheriting. But at the same time, they like the neighborhood as it is in terms of urban fabric. It needs improvements, but what I was, trying to say is that the social fabric needs to be designed. The social the spatial infrastructure needs to be designed according to the social fabric that we have already, and to connect that and to understand that. And so it's not just about buildings and about making public space more qualified, which is actually a need for that neighborhood specifically, but it's also respecting the way people live, the way people interact socially in public space, and making it legal and but also beautiful. And I think that we can bring on the new European Bauhaus motto with inclusivity, but also beauty. And actually, it's three, so I'm forgetting one, which
I
is
think
problematic.
sustainability.
Sustainable, yes, obviously, and sustainable. So, you know, making the three work, but inclusivity in a sense that respecting diversity and is respecting some, ways of living. It's also very important.
Yeah. Ryan, if I may, just a brief comment. Yeah, I
Yes,
think that
please.
one of the issues that we try to address here is that, of course, Joanna mentioned, the neighborhood is already built. But the thing is that, as Valentin and Dadi clearly also stated, that this bridge between urbanism, planning, architecture, and the CLT, and this affordability solution, which relieves families and neighborhoods from the speculative pressure, from bureaucracy pressure, in our case also this administrative public pressure, which always falls upon these communities and these neighborhoods. I think what really our main concern was to through the feasibility study design open solutions in which communities could keep the decision making could keep the decision making process within the community. So we had lots of discussions about this because we were not, despite we are proposing, for instance, a development plan, the design that, for instance, ultimately the development plan will have as a community-driven planning instrument will be very site specific. So our main concern is not to try to export solutions, but export principles in order to keep this decision-making process and possibility open, because probably it will be those possibilities that will allow these solutions to be in fact implemented and place-based and community-based.
Thank you very much, Ricardo and Joanna. I'm glad that we took the time to look at that question out loud. And thank you for sharing that. I think we have 10 minutes left in our call. Something that we talked about doing as a panel, which I think we still have the time to do and would be interesting, is to think about if each of the participants could share briefly, maybe in 1 minute, a key main takeaway or lesson that you've learned from this exchange. Because you're all coming from quite different perspectives, all working on CLTs and renovations, sharing principles, as you say, Ricardo, but with quite specific geographic adaptations. Could you share a couple of words about what you have learned from this exchange across contexts? And I didn't think about the order I was going to go in. So if someone is ready, unmute yourself.
Well, I will jump because
Perfect.
that someone say something and then I think that the renoviction, it's really a danger. And I think what's all the projects show is that if you don't do nothing, and with the housing crisis, and especially in with such an acute housing crisis in Portugal, and mainly also, very, very high in Lisbon. If you don't do in Lisbon metropolitan area, if you don't do nothing, renoviction will happen. Either is as a kind of a singular one-to-one thing in a neighborhood like Cova da Moura, either has a full marketed strategy from a developer. So I think that eviction, it has been going hand in hand with renovation, and we see it happen in many places. So that's a key point for me, that we need to act before it happens.
Yeah. Thank you, Joanna. Dali, do you have a takeaway?
Yes, I think listening to the presentations, what strikes me most is how we can basically connect forms of mutual aid, let's say, or like really empowering the residents who, as we say, they're just, if we just leave them in a status quo position, they will. It's always the usual vulnerable groups who are the victims of the status quo. So basically providing them with tools to be able to, like CLT, to take solutions to their situations, and facing also both the housing crisis and the energy crisis, but also connecting these mutual aid systems with what's relevant and what's the need of the local authorities in place. And I think that's a bit what we're also working on with Brussels, is that we see that there are certain needs from also the local authority side, who also see the crisis coming from different sides, and who are in the end who are keener in certain occasions, certain moments, to maybe recognize these mutual aid mechanisms. So yeah, really build on that, and talk to your local authorities to understand what are their needs and how basically these models help them as well.
Thank you, Dali, for sharing. Valentin or Ricardo, I don't know if either of you would like to go. Ricardo?
Yeah, just a very brief comment, because what I believe, it's a major takeaway for public policy, as Valentin and Dali mentioned, is that given our actual context of high speculative pressure, and which builds upon high pressure, of course, economically for families, I believe the main takeaway is that CLTs or OFS or BRS can really have a structural impact on cities, on families, on neighborhoods. And the non-speculative issue or the non-speculative takeaway is probably only the beginning, because all the other dimensions of community building, of wealth building, build upon that. And so this also connecting with what you already mentioned, the environmental sustainability issue, demographic pressure, all of these issues that build a very high pressure and bring up very sensitive problems to urban areas today. CLTs or related solutions can really have an impact, either in a very short term, but mainly in a very long term at almost a societal level. So I would be that would be my main takeaway also from what Valentin and Dali also shared. As a major potential from CLT and OFS as a public policy, which doesn't really need to be a top-down policy. It just need to be to have the opportunities for communities themselves to organize.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you very much. And Valentin, would you like to share a main takeaway from your side finally?
I think one important takeaway for me is that even if our local contexts are very different, we are finally facing many similar challenges across Europe. In Rennes, Brussels, or Lisbon, we are all trying to answer the same question: how can we renovate existing neighborhoods while taking into account the people who already live there? And for me, this is a very important point. Renovation, as Joanna said before, should not only improve buildings but also help existing residents remain in their neighborhoods over the long term. And about to conclude about the European dimension, I think European cooperation projects and networks like Upcycling Trust or the ECLTN are very valuable because they allow cities and organizations to learn from experiments that already exist elsewhere and to adapt them to their own local context. So it's I find it's very good.
Thank you very much, Valentin, and thank you all for the discussion. It has been really fantastic, both the discussion and for your presentations. Thank you to the four of you for joining us today. As we wrap up, I wanted to just give a little bit of a summary. So we heard from three very different perspectives here today. I think all of the panelists were summarizing really well in the end. We heard about how CLTs are a solution to provide permanently affordable housing and address Europe's diverse renovation needs, while creating permanently affordable housing, while avoiding displacement and preserving neighborhood ties, community social bonds, and responding to, I think it was the neighborhood spirit, maybe is something that you said, Joanna. And also, as you said, if we only renovate, we will face renoviction. We have to act before, we have to have a cohesive solution and approach, which CLTs are providing. A theme that stood out to me, similarly to Ricardo, is the importance of public support, of integrating CLTs into public policy, and really enabling CLTs to actually realize their potential at scale. And I wanted to note an event that we will be hosting next week as well. If you would like to join us, you are very, very welcome, where we will explore this theme of enabling factors to scale CLTs a little bit more explicitly, including public policy and strategic partnerships. We'll be launching the first State of the Sector report on community land trusts in Europe. And you can register on our website. We would be really happy to have you. In general, if you want to stay in touch or learn more, I've included contact information from the participants who shared today. As I've said, we'll be sending out a post-event report that includes the slides shared and how you can follow along with our work. And finally, when you sign off, there will be a survey that pops up on your screen that I invite you to fill out so that we can take your feedback into consideration for the future. As you move forward, you'll see that there's a number of events that are still happening as part of the series hosted by Rondo CLT and the International Center for CLTs. I think that there are 5 still to come over the next days. And you can scan the QR code on the screen to register or visit the International Center's website. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Take care.